Hello again, friends. Stephen on Sunday, Stephen Manning from the Integrity Ireland Association, S.O.S, Truth Matters, etc., etc. Again, little round of applause for myself for being able to get going at 7 o'clock. Now, as you can see, the title today, Setting Principle Standards and Sticking by Them. I want to address, and subtitle is Identifying the Sociopaths and Psychopaths in Our Lives. I'll just pull it up for you. Why this is important, why this is crucially important, not only to having peace and equilibrium in our own personal lives, but understanding the major events that are going on around the world today, how and why they're happening. If I dare say it, I actually understand how and why most of these things are happening, but it's only because of relatively recent understandings, discoveries. You could even, I suppose, at a stretch, call them revelation. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's knowledge which I feel a duty to share with as many people who will listen. It's not always as easy as I think. And I'm going to address this issue first, my friends. Now, I spent a good deal of last week and even the week before defending myself on Facebook in particular, where I had posted a couple of secondhand videos. Now, I've addressed this previously, I think sufficiently not to go over too much old ground. But I do want to bring a point forwards here. The whole reason that I did that presentation was to explain the difference between subjective and objective thinking. Now, I'd just like to go over this again briefly because we're going to tackle now one particular pretty aggressive poster on Facebook who in some way sort of came after me. I'll explain in a moment and how we're going to deal with that. But the only reason my Facebook channel is an educational channel, at least I hope it is. I've made, I think, very, very few grave errors in the materials I've put up there over the years. And when I do see something has been posted in error, I immediately move to correct it. As a matter of fact, after posting a photograph that was sent to me of some Gardaí, some police on a golf course with a judge, and I was given the wrong information about it, and I went with that information because I trusted the person who had spoken to me. It turned out that I was incorrect, and I then had to spend 10 minutes or so in a subsequent video explaining how I was wrong. But I've learned the hard way not to put materials up that I can't stand behind, generally speaking. Now, as most of you, if you've been watching last week and the week before, excuse me, you'll be aware that I posted a video of a sermon by a Dublin preacher, a pastor. And the only point I was making was in this awful conflict situation in the Middle East, especially around Gaza, the only point I was making was, look, this guy has got a slightly different perspective to most Irish people, and it's based in his understanding as a pastor of a biblical overview. I was astonished at the way that some people came at me. All of a sudden, I was a Zion Nazi. I was pushing genocide. I was, there were just all sorts of pretty nasty and visceral stuff. Some of it was more overt. Some of it was masked behind pseudo-intellectual arguments. But I ended up defending myself on allegations that had nothing to do with me, simply because I posted a third-hand video, which I thought was insightful and had some new material that most of us are aware of. After that, I also put up a short video, I think it was about 6 minutes. Again, a very credible video, I thought, by a third-party source who pointed out the undeniable fact, that whether or not the Israelis are engaged in it, that Hamas was most definitely engaged in propaganda, and that most of us were likely falling for it. So I wanted to put that viewpoint out as well. And I'll reiterate again here, guys, that I have a very open mind on this subject. And as I research information and it comes in, I'm always, adjusting, tipping. That's what a wise, well-informed person does. As you get more and more information, you put that into the knowledge bank. And if it requires that you change your perspective, you must do that. But the main point I was when I was doing these videos about subjectivity and objectivity, it might surprise some of you to know that a lot of people don't actually know the difference between the two. They haven't given it a lot of thought. They either believe stuff or they don't believe it, And I was simply making the point that if, for example, let's do a simple one, right? If there are, let's say, 10 of us in a room and someone picks up a pen and says, right, let's have an argument and a debate about this being a pen. Well, the chances are that you're not going to get much of a debate or an argument going, because everyone's going to go, well, yeah, it is a pen, isn't it? Yeah, everyone agreed it's a pen. Okay, well, let's drop that subject, because objectively, which means it's a self-evident truth, it's objectively true that this is a pen. There's no point arguing about it, really, okay? Now, on the other hand, when you come to personal beliefs or personal opinions, even if they're founded on experience and things like that, there's every chance, like the example I made in the previous video, there's every chance that if I were to turn around and say, oh, my son is the most handsome man in the world, yeah, it might be true for me to say that, but it's a subjective point of view. Asking 100 people in the street, do they also think he's the most handsome boy in the world? And we might get a different answer. So I cannot say it's a subjective fact that my son Danny is the most handsome boy in the world. It's did I say subjective instead of objective? I meant to say, I cannot say it's an objective fact that my son Danny is the most handsome boy in the world. It's a subjective truth for me, if I really believe it, but I can't claim it to be an objective fact. Now, why this becomes important, and we're going to see in a moment, guys, why this becomes important is because when looking at conflicts, and believe it or not, today we're not going to get into the minutiae anymore. We're going to drop that subject for this week. But as I said in the opening slide, we're going to set some standards here and we're going to stick by them because, well, frankly, some of the people who came on with their opinions and their attitudes, if I was in a room with them and they walked up to me and spoke to me like that, I'd walk away. Or I might indulge in a bit of, what's. But frankly, I wouldn't put up with it. So we're going to set this standard on the Facebook page from now on. If people come on there and they are rudely aggressive, making false or inflammatory accusations, attacking other people who appear to be making fair comments, and I don't necessarily mean that they always agree, because if you want to go and look at the posts on the Facebook page the last couple of weeks, there are a lot of people there that I've had quite lengthy exchanges with. We haven't ultimately necessarily come to an absolute consensus or an understanding, but at least some of them were reasonably professional, reasonably polite. And I was able to put forward a point of view which not very many people know about. And the reason not many people know about it is because it's original materials that I've been working on for several years. So I wanted to put this point of view forward, saying, well, look, the politicians and the religionists and all of the theorists and the diplomats and the philosophers, or whoever it is, haven't been able to solve this problem in the Middle East to an objective standard of satisfaction, okay? Maybe there's something we're missing. That's really all I wanted to do. I didn't expect the attacks. But anyway, this is how I dealt with this. And I want you to it might seem a little bit boring, a bit trite. We've got about 2 or 3 slides of text here. I'll bring it up. Now, I'm not going to name this person, okay? I had to delete 2 people of these posts, all right? In future, faced with the same torrent of abuse that I got, I will probably just delete far more of them and far more quickly without trying to have exchanges with them. If you're rude, if you're deliberately being difficult, if you're trying to trick and manipulate me into, and you challenge my integrity, my motives, my intentions, all of that. Well, okay, It's up to you if you want to do that, but you're not going to do it on my page in public where I have to end up defending the indefensible. Okay. So this person, like I said, this is what this person wrote to me. Okay. And after I had to delete about 3 or 4 of this person's posts and said, I'm fed up having exchanges with you. You're clearly not interested in having, a proper debate, in my opinion. And so, I'm sorry, you're blocked. And I warned this person and eventually I did it. As a matter of fact, I was very, very lenient with warnings. I gave several warnings before eventually I blocked them. But anyway, this person said, I formally request that you immediately remove all comments made by you on this page which refer to me by name or inference and which discredit my character, misrepresent my intentions, or insult me directly or indirectly. You have deleted my responses while leaving up your own, creating a false and misleading account of the exchange. This selective moderation removes my right to reply and publicly distorts the nature of the interaction. Okay. Under the Defamation Act 2009, any publication that harms a person's reputation through false or damaging statements may be subject to legal action. Oh dear. Whether those statements are explicit or implied, your actions may fall within that definition. Continued publication of this material without correction or removal may constitute reputational harm and suggest malice or intent. I think she meant malintent. Sorry, I gave away her gender there. I request that you remove all such material immediately. This is a threat, guys. I'm quite sure most of you can see through this. Now, for some reason, this person has at least 3 profiles set up in their own name, at least, okay? Because this was posted from a second, and then I later found a third, and I went ahead and blocked them as well. Now, I did write a response, but when I deleted this particular comment, the response went with it. But I've got copies, and we're going to read out for this person's particular edification, let's call it. They won't like the idea. As a matter of fact, it seemed to me that the problem really was my audacity and apparent arrogance in deigning to try to explain the difference between subjectivity and objectivity to someone who clearly felt that they were beyond being told anything or informed anything. Unfortunately, anyway, this is the way I deal with it, guys. Of course, I'm a little bit unique in this area because I had many, many years fighting in the Irish so-called justice system, only to discover that it's a cabal, a franchise of mainly disingenuous and dishonest people exploiting the public, earning a lot of money by being devious and nefarious and so on and so forth. I wrote a couple of books about it. I'm sure you've seen those. If not, go to the Integrity Ireland website. They're up there, okay? We named a lot of these characters. So I'm not in the least bit intimidated. I'm annoyed more than anything by this attitude by this person. So I'd like you all to know what I wrote back. As you see, I've removed the name because I don't want to further inflame or embarrass this person. So I'm doing this not to shame or embarrass this person, but to let those of you know why, if you come on the Facebook page again and you act like this is what's going to happen. And I won't bother wasting my time writing it all out like this. Oh dear, again, so-and-so. Firstly, I thought I had blocked you, but apparently not. I didn't know at the time that they had more than one account with the same name, you know. I also invited you at the time to contact me privately if you wished, which I did. But instead of doing so, you make this unwanted, highly dramatic, and threatening public appearance on my personal Facebook page. Why? Speaking to me in private isn't melodramatic enough for you, perhaps? Okay, so be it. And this is true. This was up about 7 hours before I saw it, friends. Not this quote, but that person's quote, okay? Secondly, and then I named the person, and in an ironic example of the lack of research you do before making insulting rants and demands on someone else's Facebook page, you clearly have no idea who you are dealing with if you think for one fleeting second that you can either threaten me or intimidate me with so-called legal action, most especially not with the Defamation Act 2009, which I assure you I am far more familiar with than you have bargained for. And the reason I say this is because when I got into my first difficulties with the system, I ended up having to take defamation proceedings against politically connected people, guards, and so on and so forth. I know how it all works. You literally wouldn't believe if I were to tell you, for example, in one of those cases where I eventually won actually an award of 25,000 euros after a very long and drawn out battle. Believe it or not, I'll just tell you one instance, guys, so you get to understand how ridiculously corrupt the Irish court system are. Basically, it was my court case. I'd initiated it. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, I got a notice from the court service in Castlebar, in County Mayo. There's been a judgment issued in your case that was heard last week. I said, what are you talking about? I wasn't told about any hearing last week. Oh, yes, you were. You were served with papers, and the judge went ahead with the defendant, and this, that, and the other happened. Right now, what happens when this happens is if you want to object to it, you have to appeal to a higher court. And so the process itself is the punishment. But on this occasion, believe it or not, the defendant, all right, who was politically connected to Enda Kenny at the time, right? Actually, they were second cousins of his, right? Had written the notification that I was to be in court, right? And sent it by registered post, but he didn't send it to me. He sent it to a retired Garda sergeant who's friends with the family, right? And this retired Garda sergeant very foolishly signed for the registered letter in his own name, right? Now, if I hadn't been very diligent at the time and gone looking for a signature, nobody would be any the wiser. Because apparently then they signed an authority in the court that I had been given notice to be in the court. The judge accepted it, okay? I think at the time it was Judge Karen Fergus. I'm not sure now. It doesn't really matter anymore. All of the ones I've dealt with, and that's been about 2/3 of the sitting judges in Ireland. There's hardly a one of them that I would allow to shake my hand, to be honest with you. I wouldn't sit next. I would just disgraceful people. We'll see why in a few minutes. But so I then appealed against it. And when I went in front of the appeal judge, and I think it was Rory McCabe, who's now in charge of what used to be GSOC, when I went in front of him and I said, look, hold on a minute. I never received any such notification. Here's the post office signature of, and I think his name was Cafferkey, who was an ex-guard. He signed for the documents that they claimed that they served on me. This is how ridiculous it is, guys. And the judge just swept us, and all the rest of it. I mean, it was horrendously ridiculous. So in other words, they engaged in fraud. They engaged in an act to pervert the course of justice. They engaged in deception. They engaged in perjury. And the judge, a series of judges, wouldn't do a damn thing about it. Okay, nothing. So I just want you to understand, guys, that, listen, I don't think there's a lawyer in Ireland that would be pleased at the prospect of taking me on in court, quite frankly, because they know I will fight. They know I know what I'm doing now. And I hope they've got as little interest in the prospect as I do. I just don't trust them. I don't see any point in going into an Irish court anymore unless it's an opportunity to expose the corruption and show people what's going on. Anyway, so that was the first part of what I wrote to her. Hold on. Then I said this, and it was just one complete post. By the way, I say to her, you did keep copies of the insulting and defamatory posts you made towards me, didn't you? Which are the ones I deleted, right? That she's complaining about. Because without that purported evidence, your silly threats are self-evidently void. In other words, if she can't produce the material she claims that I wrongly deleted, which anyway, then the whole, it's just the threatening nonsense, especially given that I am more than happy to display those deleted posts to the public again, if that is the only way I can effectively educate you as to when it is best to keep one's counsel to oneself. So what I'm really saying to her, and I sort of said it in the heat of the moment, and what I'm saying is, there's this technique where you turn the table. Some people are trying to threaten you or whatever. And I'm saying to her, well, look, I've got copies, which I have. I have copies of those deleted posts. Would you really like me to put them back up online and ask, let's have a poll, and ask people, what's your opinion of this? Do you think I was right to take this down, or should I have continued arguing with this person ad infinitum, or as I might say, ad nauseum, Then I tell this person, you came onto my Facebook page. I did not invite you. You were rude, insulting, and obstreperous, in my opinion. And after many warnings, I removed some of your posts. Then I blocked you. But now you are back again, uninvited. The discussion ultimately was supposed to be about the difference between subjective and objective thinking. But you kept trying to make it personal and about other extraneous issues, which I was explaining, guys, kept harping back into alleged atrocities being committed on both sides in the, in the Gaza conflict and all that, and just trying to drag me into a taking a side debate when I was trying to do my best to remain objective, But yeah, it is my prerogative to block posts or people that I deem to be objectionable. It is also my prerogative to ignore threatening demands, which, apart from posting this retort, is precisely what I intend to do. And then finally, interestingly, I said to this person, it is my subjective opinion that counts here, not yours, objectively speaking, that is. And it is my subjective opinion that I should treat all of your legalistic bluff and bluster exactly as I treated your irritating posts. Accordingly, I will now be blocking you again and respectfully urge you to reconsider the wisdom of trying to pick a fight in an arena where you are neither wanted nor invited and where you have already proven you are poorly equipped to contest. Try doing something more fruitful with your time instead of picking arguments and fights that you cannot win. And maybe be a touch more respectful in future if you wish to engage in constructive communications with people like myself who put our reputations on the line to deal with difficult topics and materials. And just to add sort of a little bit of icing on the cake, I just thought to myself, well, look, rather than provoke or irritate this person further, there's nothing much to be gained from leaving that person's posts, the ones that were already there, up there. I might as well just take them all down. I'll take the whole lot down, including my own responses. But as you see here, guys, and this is authentic, absolutely authentic. No permission to add comment or trying to comment on a deleted post. I don't fully understand how and why this is happening. But there again, on the right, the same thing happened. I was on the thread and I was going in. I was managing to be able to delete one letter before this sign would come up. Then I'd have to X out of it. I go back in and then another letter would be deleted. It's just ridiculous. Frankly, it's technically impossible. I don't know why. But anyway, that just ended the whole matter for me. I don't even know if that person saw that response that I've just read out to everyone before I deleted the demands, the legalistic demands. I just see now, where are we? Yeah. Okay, so we'll just go back for a second. Or actually, I'll just put myself up full screen here for a moment. Wrong one. There we are. Yeah, don't worry about that. That's to remind me to jump across and show you something else. So the point I'm trying to make, my friends, and I do mean this most sincerely. I'm not claiming to be perfect for a minute, but my main reason for doing these videos, for having a Facebook platform, for having endured nearly, it's about 18 years now of pretty scandalous harassment from the system in Ireland, because I just try to stand up and do the right thing, basically. And it's morphed into this, you become then somebody people want to listen to, and so on and so forth. I was a bit taken aback by some of the reactions because of the very strong opinions particularly on the, let's call it the pro sort of Palestinian side. There's some very strong opinions, and there was clearly an impasse. There was no point in me trying to engage at the level I was trying to. I was saying, right, okay, we all know all this bad stuff is going on, but let's just go up a little bit. Let's go objective. Let's try and park our subjectivity and go a little bit more objective, and let's look at a few universal truths that might give us a different lens to look at, the conflict, to look through, and maybe give us a different perspective. Because my perspective is not 100% rooted in concrete. But because I know about this thing top right on your screen there, the original principle, and because I can see a lot of symbolic associations and connections to what's going on, I'm thinking about this somewhat differently than just, let's say, the humanitarian souls who are so appalled at what they're hearing in the news that there only seems to be one answer to this, or by, people who are very pro Zionism or Israelis or whatever, and so on, and then they have a view as well. But we're not getting into that topic now again, not certainly not this week. We're watching with great interest what's unfolding at the moment. We can only hope and pray that, as I say, without sounding corny, that God's will be done. And I really mean that. And that's ultimately what I'm looking for. But unwittingly, often many of us do things in our lives daily, not realizing that we're facilitating, contributing, funding, supporting, voting for people that I would describe as the diabolicals. They're not there. And that's what we're going to look at in a minute, the sociopaths and psychopaths. Okay. So having said that, I say to that person that I blocked, there was 2 of them, I'm genuinely sorry. I mean, you could have contacted me in private, and maybe we could have had a less provocative exchange, because of course, when you're attacking me in public on my own Facebook page, I feel, and some people are clicking likes on it, I have to go in then and try and defend myself. I don't want that exchange, guys. I've got better things to be doing. I'm not claiming that everything I say is absolutely right, but if you disagree with it and you want to say something in public about it, please do so in a manner that is reasonable, in a manner that wouldn't get you kicked off the debating stage if you talk like that, or which wouldn't get you a bop on the nose, or, have me walking out the door, because I just won't deal with people like that. All right. That's all I'm saying, guys. But from now on, by all means, comment, even critique what's being said, and help educate other people. If you've got something to offer that you think helps inform the situation. There was a lot of links put up now by people who would be very anti-Israeli, for example. I looked at all of them, guys. Honestly, I did. I looked at all of them. I listened to the videos. I got a little bit better educated because I saw some of them, that I hadn't seen before. But that's what you do. That's what the courteous, genuine researcher or educator does. They keep an open mind. It's actually the first premise of being a teacher, is that you remain a student all of your life. Okay, and the minute that you lose that capacity or that willingness or that ability, you cannot call yourself an educator or a teacher anymore. All right, so we'll drop that subject now. We'll switch over. Well, it's the same subject, really. Going to switch over now to this fella. Well, hold on a minute. Is that the wrong one? Hold on. Why is that not? What's happened here? Please give me a second, friends. Give me a second. I think what I've done is, you see, we all can learn something new every day. All right. My apologies. All right. Empath, apath, or sociopath, understanding human evil at the individual and social level. I'm sure there's none of us amongst us would like to be told, especially in a scientific way or an objective way, that we were evil, All of us, I'm sure, anybody with a heart and a conscience, even some of the truly wicked people, they don't like being told, hey, you're a truly wicked person, you're evil, and look at, But it's something we have to understand, because I'll start by making one point, which we won't be fully covering today, but it's in some of my other presentations. Evil is not supposed to exist. The fact that we've gotten used to it, the fact that most of human history is based on evil, or the battle between good and evil, does not mean that it was supposed to exist. Evil is an attack on that original principle, top right. Don't be misled by the yin yang I've got on the slide here. A lot of people just see it that way, But it was never supposed to be there. It's an attack on the original principle, okay? And we need to understand this in context, I hope, of something that you may have seen before, but we're going to go through it again today in a little detail. So there are basically, I always have to deal in generalizations, and I also have to simplify If there are other psychologists out there looking at this, they quite rightly can say, oh, this is far too simplistic. And listen, we have to start somewhere. If there's anything within this that isn't psychologically or literally or self-evidently true or right, I'm open to listening to it and hearing it. But I think you'll find that this is a very good demonstration, all right, of the types of people we have in the world in general. We've broken them down into three main types. We have empaths on the left, empathetic people. This is people who are generally kind, right? We're just talking about their generalizations. They're generally kind and helpful and thoughtful and caring, considerate, all that sort of stuff. At the opposite end of the spectrum, you have sociopaths and psychopaths. These are people who, in a nutshell, do not truly care about other people, only in as much as it's of service to them or it profits them or it's of benefit to them in some way. But it's not genuine care. If you come to them with a sad story, it's like, don't waste my bloody time. I'm going out on my night out tonight or something. Or, they're not going to feel it. They're not the sort of people that are going to weep at, humanitarian horrors on the TV and things like that. Just doesn't concern them. All right. There's a reason for this. And then in the middle, we've got this group that we're calling apaths. All right. Apathetic people. Now, apathetic people are people who, for one reason or another, either don't care, can't care, or are just willing to be led by the nose by whoever happens to be in control, in power, in authority. The insulting words for people like this are the sheeple. But we've got to understand a couple of things before we move to the next slide. We have to understand a few things here. So the way I designed this slide, you can see, and again, anybody can use these. I just ask that you give credit back to me in case there are questions, and then I can deal with them myself. Yeah. As you can see, I first put this together about 4 years ago, before I did the Crisis Color Coup book. It's in there. Okay. So you see the arrow on the left. At the top end of the arrow are the well-educated and well-informed people. At the bottom are uneducated and uninformed people. So, and then in the middle, you see the varying degrees, okay, of the types of people. So, for example, from the bottom, going up when you're talking to empaths, at the very bottom, we have people who are what? They are obedient, they are compliant, they are vulnerable, and they are acquiescent. Why? Right? So they might be people who truly care, which is a step better than just being an apath who just doesn't care about anything, right? But they're not that well informed. This could be young people, children even, well-intentioned do-gooders, who haven't really got a grasp of full understanding of the world, but they're easily captured by whoever might come to them with an idea or a proposition or a suggestion or an ideology or a religion or whatever it might be, okay? They tend to, right? So as you go up that scale, you see the next level up are honest, generous, thoughtful, and trustworthy, okay, which is true of the empaths. They tend to be, at the lower end, they tend to be passive or inactive. As you move up the scale, they become a bit more concerned and disturbed at what they're seeing as they get better educated. Then they become questioners and truth seekers. Then they become supportive and proactive of actively good people. And these are the very, very few people in the world that actually take a principled stand. I'd obviously put people in there like Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, the whistleblowers, maybe in Ireland, Enoch Burke, certainly several of my friends and colleagues in the pro-justice movement that have shown extraordinary courage and diligence in difficult circumstances to simply do what's right. They have my, they have my admiration and respect, So let's move to the apaths then, just from the bottom upwards: unconcerned, apathetic, ignorant, or unaware, don't want to know and don't really care. They tend to be passengers, followers, or obedience. Yeah. And then at the very top, you've got apaths who actually should know better. They're actually they're well informed. They know what's going on in the world, but they're not doing anything about it. And the question is why? And as I say here, I'll just bring it up a little larger so I can read it a bit easier. These are socially aware people, but who are variously damaged, despondent, compromised, alienated, unmotivated, and or unconcerned. And this could include people, for example, working in large corporations who can't afford, for risk of losing their jobs, or who work for the government or for the police, and they simply have to, you try and sit down to them and have a discussion about the morality of taking their batons out, let's say, and beating up the protesters. And they slide into this bracket going, look, hey, don't want to hear it. Just don't bother me with that stuff. I can't afford to have an opinion on it, because if I think about it too hard, I'm not going to be too happy with myself. And what am I going to do at this? I've been in the Guards for 30 years. My pension's coming up. What am I supposed to do? I'm going to continue to follow orders, right? And you see how it starts to work, all right? Now let's go over to the bad guys on the right, sociopaths and psychopaths. At the bottom, because they're the lowest educated, they're uneducated, not informed. Here you have liars, bullies, abusers, and violent criminals, most of whom are in jail, frankly, or have been caught. As they get more clever, as they go up the scale, right, they tend to be lackeys and opportunists. Yeah, so on the devious side, they'll see an opportunity. Because they're sociopaths and psychopaths, they don't really care about the damage they're doing to others. They're thieves, fraudsters, and deceivers. Slightly more clever ones are collusive and complicit in what? With the predators, the exploiters, the manipulators. Then they become facilitators and enablers of who? Actively evil people at the top right. These are the clever dicks, guys. These are, right. And one clarity I'll make, guys, before we go to the next slide, one quick clarification is that psychopaths are born, sociopaths can be made. And I've done this many times. I'll just simply say this, that if you take an innocent child who is an empath, right, and you stick them in an environment, whether it's abusive home environment or inappropriate educational materials, whatever it might be, or you put them into a job when they're a teenager where you just obey the boss and that's all you're allowed to do, you'll find you can train and condition that person who would otherwise be a beautiful human being. You can slowly train and condition them to become a sociopath. Arguably, nearly all of the successful people in the world, by successful, I mean monetarily successful, who have had to come up through the ranks of what I call the diabolical pyramid. Those types of people, there are some exceptions, of course, but generally speaking, they've all become far down on the sociopathic scale, all right? Now, the question I like to posit to people is, freeze this, come back to it later, and ask yourself, where am I on this graph? Where would I place myself today on this graph? But even better than that, guys, and this is where you really get the brain cells going, is where am I on this graph at any given moment in any given day, all right? Because it's in our immediate actions that we place ourselves, an act of road rage, for example, you get the tire iron out the back of your car and you're ready to lump someone over the head with it. Well, clearly you're way over there on the side of the bullies, the aggressive, violent so-and-sos, right, aren't you? The rest of the day you might be a saint. But if you lose your temper in that moment, you've got to realize, oh my God, what have I done? I've strayed into the dominions of hell here. I must correct myself. I must, try and correct and keep myself always aiming as best I can up towards that top left-hand side. But that's just a model, my friends. That's all it is. So let's move on to the next one. Here's a nice slide that you can freeze again for yourself if you wish. And this, again, is to show the difference between humans and plants and animals, okay? Again, very simply, I know a lot of people say, oh, my dog, you can't say my dog doesn't have a soul. No. You're mixing up the difference between a soul and a personality, A dog can, of course, have a personality and a wonderful one at that. But they don't have a soul in the same way that we do. They cannot make moral decisions. They might make nice decisions or good decisions based on their loyalty and faithfulness to their master or whatever. But as I've said before, if you put a bowl of dog food down in front of a hungry dog, he's not going to think about it and say, I better leave half of this for the poodle next door, right? Is he? I mean, that's just not, it doesn't work like that. So basically, in the middle first, guys, in the natural world, the processes, all right, of plants and animals comprise impulses, appetites, needs, and instinct. Very, very simply, they eat, sleep, reproduce. A balanced ecosystem is the natural outcome of that, okay? So they fit in harmony with nature. But then we go to, let's go to the left first. Good human beings on the left. Humane values. There's the little golden heart up there signifying love and goodness and all of the empathetic traits that we talked about. Okay, here they are, the virtues. Yeah, so it's about moral direction and control. Okay, so the impulse is to moral direction and control. The virtues: generosity, kindness, consideration, selflessness, cooperation, collaboration, empathy, truth, justice, honesty, sharing, and protection. And if you have concept, plan, action, do you remember the original principle top right? Concept, plan, and action, spirit, mind, and body, deity, feminine, masculine, in that order, and many, many more, you will invariably have a good outcome. Look over on the right-hand side, though. If your concept is based on inhumane values, which equals amoral urges and drives, usually associated with money or profit or worldly rewards, usually, okay, then the plan and the action will produce an evil outcome. What are those vices? Greed, cruelty, exploitation, selfishness, domination, force and violence, sociopathy, lies and deceits, injustice, dishonesty, acquisition and destruction. All sociopathic traits, my friends. And of course, most of us have a mixture of virtues and vices. The challenge, if you're truly wanting to become a better person, is to try and eliminate the vices and develop the virtues. And this might require more than just thinking and praying about it. Again, this is something that an awful lot of people miss, including a lot of religious people. I've got a lot of friends who are religiously involved. It might require removing yourself from a location or a set of circumstances. For example, me last week on Facebook, I found myself I was getting angry. I was getting a little bit, I started to begin, I felt the unkindness. I wanted to put these people in their place. I wanted to point out to them how allegedly stupid and ignorant and had lack of objectivity. And I had to rein that in, because ultimately it doesn't help anybody, but if it's a choice between having a debate that risks dragging me down into the dark side, partly because of my own ego, no doubt, then the better thing to do is just politely block those people, or tell them privately in a message, I've removed your post, so sorry. I'm not going to block you yet, but if you come back like that again, you're going to be blocked. Please show respect. As I said to that other person, some of us are putting our reputations on the line regularly by not only dealing with difficult topics, but by going up against the system in a very direct and confrontational way that often bears no rewards other than things like prison and harassment and vilification and character assassination and all that sort of stuff. Please. Anyway, enough said about that, guys. Let's move on to the next one. I hope we're not going to do it again. We're going to run out of time. It's all right if we do, guys. I'd rather cover these. So here, again, some of you will have seen this before. Just to give you an idea, personality traits and occupations, empaths versus sociopaths. I've already explained that. That includes psychopaths, okay? On the left-hand side, at the top, so this would be the most empaths are drawn to these professions in this order. So you're likely to find the highest percentage of clinically defined empaths as care workers, then nurses, then therapists, then craftsperson, then beauticians and stylists, charity workers, teachers, creative artists, doctors, and accountants. Okay, I could spend 20 minutes, an hour even talking about this alone, but we won't. And what are their traits? Kind and caring, self-sacrificing, honest and truthful, cooperative, repentant, thoughtful, compassionate, dependable, engaged, meaning not engaged and not married, but they engage with you, engaging, maybe I should have said, or they're engaged in, a relationship. Sympathetic, facilitative, generous, empathetic, considerate, and trustworthy. Lovely. That's the sort of person you want on the desert island when you're trapped on the desert island. That's the sort of person you want to get married to. That's the sort of person you want to be looking after your kids when you're going out to the cinema or something, okay? That's the sort of person you want to work for. That's the sort of person you want to be, right? If you have a heart and a conscience, okay? On the other hand, we've got these people, the red column: ruthless and immoral, deceptive, charismatic, manipulative, predatory, avaricious, remorseless, exploitative, ambitious, self-serving, egocentric, pitiless and callous, unforgiving, unscrupulous, and unsympathetic. And which professions draw these in? And again, apologies to those of you who may be in these professions, because it's not exclusive. It's just scientifically proven through studies that the highest percentage of sociopaths and psychopaths are drawn to be CEOs of international corporations. Makes absolute 100% sense to me, because as a CEO, if you're not generating profits at any price, savage capitalism, if you're not generating profits at any price, the board is going to remove you. You have to be ruthless. You can't be worried. Well, how's Fred doing in the mailroom? Oh, he's not as fast as the previous guy, but he's we like him, and he's personable, and he's got a family to feed. So out he goes. Get someone in there who can do the job more efficiently. They don't care. That's why they're able to do those things. Secondly, and very interestingly, are lawyers. And of course, judges, solicitors, barristers, attorneys, whatever you want to call them. All right. They're drawn to this profession for a reason. Don't need to go into it in depth today, but it's very plain for me to see. The legal profession, I think it's fair to say, has become almost impossible to maintain personal integrity and be a successful legal practitioner, because sooner or later you're going to come up against liars in the system, corrupt judges, and then you're asking yourself the question, do I point out what this corrupt, devious judge is doing, or whoever it might be, or a policeman, or do I protect my pension? And of course, then the people who suffer are the people who trust the lawyers, of course, and so on. Media doesn't need to be expounded upon. TV and radio presenters and the like, Salesperson, why? Because they can exaggerate. Not all salesperson, of course. I mean, if you've got a fantastic product, that's wonderful. But there's a tendency for salespeople to be deceptive and manipulative and things like that. Surgeon. Well, why is the surgeon here when there's doctor? The doctor is over on that one. It's very simple, actually, guys, logical. Because the doctor cares about people. Surgeons are mechanics of the body, are they not? So it doesn't mean that they're bad people. It means that they don't need any empathetic skills. They don't need them. Might make them a better surgeon if they had it. But then again, you don't want to be breaking down in the middle of an operation thinking about poor Fred and what's his family going to do if he dies on the operating table. No, So it makes complete sense. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't mean they don't deserve what they earn. It doesn't mean that they're not good family and members of society, family members and members of society. Nothing like that. Not at all. It's just a clinical observation that a lot of sociopaths and psychopaths are in these professions, right? Police officer, no surprise, I'm sure. I know some, I'm friendly with some, I respect some, but unfortunately, there's a selection process that actually looks for sociopathic traits when they're hiring police officers. This is certainly true in England, which has been proven, and in some of the American states. They have psychological tests to identify. The other interesting thing is if they score too high on it's the IQ test, I think, it's not just an intelligence test, but anyway, if they score too high on the independent thinking test, that's what it is. They won't hire them. They don't want them. They want people who'll say yes or no, sir, and who'll be bullies without losing any sleep over it if they need them to be. Cleric, very interesting, probably drawn to the position of power and authority. Some clerics, as opposed to the saintly ones that we all know, of course, yeah. Chef, again, another mechanic of food who has to be particularly abusive to everybody around him. If we think of our TV chefs, what's his name, the Scottish guy? Slipped my mind again. You're dealing with food. You're dealing with an item. There's no empathy needed. You're dealing with carrots and spuds and lumps of meat and whatever. And you have to be a nasty bully boy to get everything done on time because it's such a stressful environment, I suppose. And finally, civil servants stroke politicians shouldn't be a surprise, guys, because they're all embedded and trapped in these diabolical hierarchies. Okay? Now, there's a simple slide in the same vein. This is what I call the diabolical pyramid. It's almost how all institutions in the world are formed, all large institutions, that is. They all are formed on this model. There's a boss, the CEO, he has management below him and workers, and there's an outcome. Now, here's the interesting little part, and that corresponds to spirit, mind, body. But again, if the CEO of the corporation is likely a sociopath or a psychopath, then you can be sure that the values of that pyramid are not good, okay? And how do you get promoted? Through ambition, greed, service to the system or the organization, correct? Think about it, guys, yeah? The outcome equals the manifestation of the values, in this case of a sociopath or a psychopath, plus the real objective, which is rarely disclosed to the public, you know? The purpose of the banking system is not to make sure we've all got enough money to spend. It's actually to protect the banking elites and make sure they stay absolutely in power over and above the governments even of this world, okay? But that can't be told to us. So they sell us a lie, then they hire the type of people they need to manage that lie whilst giving the appearance that they're doing something completely different. So what sort of people are you going to work for? What sort of people do you want? They're at the bottom, staffing. Do you want obedience or free thinkers? Well, free thinkers are not going to last very long in an environment because they'll become whistleblowers, okay? And so they are actively training people to suppress their consciences, to do as they're told, and in return, they reward them and bump them up the promotion ladder until eventually they become fully blown, fully trained sociopaths, which is equivalent to a psychopath. It's the same mannerisms, you know? So anyway, freeze any of these and come back to them if you wish, guys. And I think I've got another very similar one here. This is the same model, but this time it's the government or the boss has bureaucrats and administrators below him, and then they have employees, consumers, customers, and the public. Over on the right here, this government or the boss, he's motivated by the wrong set of values: money, power, prestige, greed and profit via domination, oppression, exploitation, lies, injustices, etc. These are inhumane values, all right? It's a bad concept, okay? It then poisons the plans and the consequent actions. The outcome then is evil. They're bureaucrats and administrators, organized and institutionalized administrative and bureaucratic systems to achieve unpublicized objectives via mass deceptions, PR, and social conditioning. Think about the pandemic, guys. Think about how this system, you know, came into full flow operation. As a matter of fact, just think how the government works. And finally, the employees, consumers, customers, and the public are, in large part, obedient lackeys, sycophants, and servile employees trapped in fear, ignorance, and or convenience, and or misplaced loyalties. So there's all a number of reasons why we justify, oh, well, I've just got to do my job, and I've got kids to put through school, and I've got to put food on the table. And I'm not for a minute saying it's as simple as us to say, oh, I get it, Stephen. This is all diabolical. It's all wicked. It all started at the fall, Cain murdering Abel, and then Cain set up all of his first city in Nod, which is Iran today, and we're all inherited now, and we all think this is the only way that human society can work. Let's all abandon it. And yeah, well, it would be wonderful if it were possible to literally sort of abandon all of these systems, cast aside all of our clothing, and wander naked back into the Garden of Eden. That's the idea, though. That's the concept, so to speak. You know, not necessarily naked. I don't really get accused of being a pervert as well, guys. You know, but the idea, that's the notion. The notion is we've got to get away from these so-called authority figures who are not our sovereign authorities. They've imposed themselves there using the mechanisms of what I call the dark, satanic, Cain, masculine mindset. All right? Think about it, guys. All right? It all makes sense. What was the next one? Ah, yes. And now, you saw this one already, guys. The point, very simply, I'm just going to say this. That was the model. That was the explanatory model. All right? If you haven't seen this before, sit down for the next one. This, my friends, is how the world is today. Okay, for numerous reasons, as I see, we've only got about 5 or 6 minutes left. For numerous reasons, going back to antiquity, yeah, there's been a creeping malaise infesting the world. All of the problems and difficulties that we're having trace back to an attack on the original principle. And this attack, which you can call evil, is being fostered and facilitated by actively evil people. Most of them are in very high places. Many of them, we never know their faces or see them, but they are controlling. And unfortunately, it's certainly up until recently, this was what was happening. The evil entities, if you like, through propaganda, through the media, through making up laws that they keep inventing, through suppression, through tyranny, through all sorts of social and geopolitical instruments, have managed to capture all but the well-educated and well-informed, actively good people at the top of the empathetic side of the scale. I hope this makes sense, my friends. They've captured everyone else. And the only difference from this and the previous slide showing you there, all the apaths have been captured. These are the sheeple. And there's no reason why you can't become an unsheeple, become an actively good person, but you have to first recognize that you've been captured by the diabolicals. Yeah. And at the very top there, I've said the actively evil people have gained control of global institutions, capitalism, communism, even democracy, guys, to a certain extent, because it's not really democracy. We'll come back to that another time. Banks, nation states, media, education, health, justice and law, energy, food, science, and the so-called professions. Why do I say this? Well, what makes a profession, guys? I would say two main things. Number one, technical knowledge and expertise. Right? If you want to call yourself a professional in any given field. So first of all, technical knowledge and expertise, coupled with what? Morality and ethics. Right? Coupled with morality and ethics. And if you lose the morality and the ethics, you can no longer call yourself a genuine professional, even though you've got the expertise. I, for one, want nothing to do with you. I've had people work for me in different locations and venues over the years. I have a little questionnaire I give them. It's designed, it's very simple. It's only got 9 questions on it. As a matter of fact, I'll share it with you guys. I see as we're coming to a close, I'll share it with you because I think this might intrigue and any managers out there who are thinking of hiring people, okay? I would give them, it's a single sheet of paper. So they'd come in for the interview. And the first 3 questions were, please state the 3 most important qualities of an employee, all right? And the 3 most important qualities, and usually they put something like good timekeeper, works hard, doesn't answer back to the boss or something like that, whatever it might be, right? Then I'd say, now put down the 3 most important qualities of an employer, okay? Me, who was the boss at the time, okay? And, they might say, pays on time, is kind and friendly, or whatever it might be. So they put these things down. It's a great way to understand how the relationship is going to be between you and this prospective worker. But then on the back, I'd say, right, turn it over now. And then on the side, it said, now rate yourself 1 to 10 on the 3 most important qualities of an employee that you put down on the first page. Now, first of all, guys, all I was looking for was something to do with integrity or honesty or truthfulness. If they didn't put something down there as being an important quality of an employee, something to do with being honest and trustworthy and that sort of stuff, if it wasn't there, I didn't hire them, guys. Didn't matter how well qualified they were, how experienced they were. I didn't hire them. I'd say, thank you very much, and we'll let you know, type of thing, Secondly, if they did put something down about honesty or integrity or truthfulness, and they rated themselves less than 10 out of 10 on it, I didn't employ them. Got to think about it. How can you be almost honest? But I made a little bit of an allowance for a couple of them who then would explain, well, actually, there was one time when I did such and such, and I felt I couldn't put 10 out of 10 because I'm not perfect. And that's honest, so I was able to give them a job. Last minute, guys, of course, we've run short again. Some of the tail end slides, I think we're going to have to keep this to about a dozen slides a week and no more. I hope you got something out of this today. I won't go to the last slide now. We'll just leave this up for the moment. Thank you again, everyone, for your support and your kindness. Please behave yourself when you come on my Facebook pages and leave comments. And let's collectively see if we can work out what is the best and most promising future that we can help create for all of us. Love and God bless. See you next week. Thank you.